Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate following that leaked telephone conversation, that alleged leaked telephone conversation, one that's been staunchly denied by Turkey's prime minister, that was leaked on Monday evening and went quickly viral on YouTube. We're talking about it all with Galip DALAY of the SETA Foundation think tank. He's with us in Ankara. Barçin, YİNANÇ, opinion editor at Hurriyet Daily News, is in Istanbul. Emre, DEMIR, editor at Zaman and the French edition of Zaman, and Arnaud CASTAIGNET, political consultant. Welcome back to all of you. And again, as we were saying at the top, for those of you who haven't followed this closely, there's been a whole host of new surprises. Last week, and we heard the people are comparing it to the Magnificent Century, the soap opera that everybody follows, not just in Turkey but throughout the region. And they're saying that what is happening in real life is, in a way, more surprising than that soap opera. And we know that the Turks love their soap operas. Emre, DEMIR, like a soap opera then, would you say that people are watching this and sort of watching more as spectators than actively participating?
Well, just after the first investigation, the situation was like that, actually. Everybody saw that as a political struggle, political war between the Gülen movement and the AKP. So the leftists, the Kemalists, etc., they all watched the fight, because it was a fratricide fight. So we now see that it may be too late, and it was a wrong interpretation to see it as just a political struggle between the two powers, because Erdogan is now has now much more power, and uncontrolled, unchecked, and unlimited power on the state and on the Turkish society.
But do you take in that case the point that Galip DALAY made just before the break, that Parliament is there to offer some checks and balances, and in fact they've already put some curbs on that internet censorship bill?
Yeah, it is. President Abdullah Gül offered some minor changes, which doesn't change the general the general way of the laws, the MIT law and the judicial law. It won't be a great change, actually. A big change. We still have a very problematic law on judiciary and on MIT too. So it's not a major change. We're not talking about a major change. And what Galip said about the Gülen movement is also important. I think we are saying the same thing shortly. Gülen movement, Fethullah Gülen himself, has been accused with similar accusations. He's been judged and acquitted 3 times before. It was then the Turkish army who made the same accusations, and now it's AKP are making the same accusations. It is true that in the public opinion that there's this we think that the Gülen movement is powerfully within the state, but we don't yet have any proof on that, and it is important. And if there are any wrongdoings, then judiciary must play his role too.
All right. The head of the European Parliament on Twitter, Martin Schulz, saying, "I'm disappointed by new restrictive law which imperils independence of judiciary and raises questions on Turkey EU commitment." Arnaud CASTAIGNET, what does it all say about Turkey at this point? What's going on?
Yeah, well, we were talking about soap opera, and while people are watching a soap opera, nobody's caring about the economy, for instance. And the Turkish economy is struggling, and this political crisis is weakening even more. Turkish lira has hit a new low, and it has hit a 2-week low against the dollar. The currency has been weakened for several months now, which led the central bank to hike the interest rates, even despite Erdogan's vehement opposition. Turkey has several problems also regarding the deficit, which is around 8%, and we have the impression that the government is not caring about it. Where everybody's just focused on this political soap opera, but nobody's doing anything to reinforce the economy, and Turkish economy really needs it. So actually, we may think that Erdogan's main success from now, which is the economy, could actually be what is going to deal the ultimate blow against him, because Turkish economy is now the most fragile economy among the emerging countries.
Galip, DALAY, do you agree?
First of all, I'm a political analyst, so therefore, whatever I'm going to comment on the economy will be from the perspective of a non-economist. So far we haven't seen any significant. But you agree that there's political
gridlock as a result, and that is putting into question the Turkish model, as it's called?
Well, the Turkish model from the start has been a problematic concept. By which, it was produced actually by American first, and then, bought by European second. And the Turks was actually the third one to join the club in order to talk about Turkish models. So therefore, I think it's a very ambiguous term to talk about Turkish model. But if you mean, by Turkish model, if you mean that, whether democracy is compatible with Islam, and whether, it can also deliver the economic prosperity, my answer would be yes, it is still valid. Democracy also means that when you have mass, you do tackle with it, in a democratic manner. When you don't tackle with it, in a rightful way, in the next election, people will vote you out. So I think, the Turkish model for very much is in action. We have drawn. If we draw the right lessons from the Gezi Park protests, and if we draw the right lessons from the power struggle between the Gülen movement and the AK Party, which is a very problematic issue, let's state it first, because on the one hand, we are talking about an elected, accountable, and visible government. On the other hand, we are talking about an unelected, unaccountable, and invisible shady organization, and we are holding them as if it's equally legitimate force to have a power struggle in the political domain. So, putting this aside, but Turkey, if draw the right lesson from Gezi Park protests, and to focus on, the understanding of democracy, which goes beyond parliament and party politics, yes, Turkish model is actually gaining force from what has been taking place in the last couple months. So in this aspect, I'm optimist. I'm on the optimist side, not the pessimist side on the long run, because this is part of the maturation process.
All right, you're saying that, but during drawing the right lessons from Gezi Park and drawing the right lessons from what's going on here in the West, we're seeing some surprising pronouncements from the Prime Minister. Last week, Recep Tayep Erdogan admitting that he called one of the bosses of news channel Haberturk TV to get him to remove captions of a speech by an opposition leader.
Yes, I called. Obviously, I called. All I did was issue a reminder to those individuals regarding a TV caption. There were insults against us, against a Prime Minister who was abroad at the time. So I called them regarding that speech, and they took the necessary measures.
Barçin, YİNANÇ, let me get your reaction to this, because on top of it, I read a surprising piece in your paper this morning about how when the opposition leader spoke in Parliament and he played that audio tape that the Prime Minister says is doctored, that the mainstream media channels cut away from their coverage of Parliament during the time when he played the audio tape.
Well, this is called self-censorship, basically, because some of the media outlets in Turkey basically are under the instruction of the Prime Minister, as we have witnessed. And another part of the media outlets are sort of scared of indirect sort of ways of bearing the pressure, because in the past we have seen that the Turkish tax officers came knocking on the doors of certain media outlets, and their aim wasn't really to make a healthy scrutiny, but to sort of punish media outlets. Therefore, unfortunately, although this is shocking, every day we have similar instances like that. But let me make a reference to the soap operas. Unfortunately, this is sort of a tragedy that we are watching, because it was a tragedy before December 17 when the corruption scandals broke out, and it is a tragedy now. It was a tragedy before because, yes, there was a separate structure within state apparatus, and we knew their existence. In fact, the military themselves had warned that Gülenists were penetrating state structures, and when AKP came to power, they made an alliance, and with controversial, fabricated evidences in certain cases, the army's strength was diminished. At that time, there were also illegal wiretappings, and these were provided to the press, and the government didn't say anything about it. The irony is that at that time they did not make any reference to the need of rule of law and justice. Today they realize that they themselves need an independent, healthy justice working on international standards. And yes, there is a need today of sort of getting rid of a separate structure within the state apparatus, but this should not be replaced by people and personalities that will be directly responsible to the government itself. For instance, with the new law, which the president has confirmed today about the High Board on Judges and Prosecutors, at least 1,000 people are set to be changed, and they will be appointed mostly by the Minister of Justice. So we're seeing a whole lot of more centralization of power in the hands of the government, and that's a very dangerous process that is unfolding in Turkey.
But do you take Galip Dalay's point that at the end of the day, it's still a democracy and the ballot box will have the final say?
Well, we have to hope that at the end of the day, the ballot box needs to solve the issue. But as I said, the problem is if the voters will be voting for the government, that doesn't mean that then the government should be free of these corruption charges. Especially, we cannot expect the local elections to solve the issue. But as a democracy, obviously, we need to rely on the ballot box. But the problem is the ballot box itself is not the whole of democracy. Democracy doesn't work just based on the votes you got, and that's the problem, the very problem of the ruling Justice and Development Party. The Prime Minister believes that as long as he's got the majority, then he can do as he like. Whereas, you know, he is supposed to be the Prime Minister of the whole country, and he has to take into consideration the views of those that haven't even voted for him. But so far, he hasn't acted like that, and he hasn't shown that he will do differently.
Galip Dalay, do you agree that there's too much power being concentrated in the hands of the Prime Minister?
Generally, overall, I do think that Turkey is a highly centralized state. I mean, there is too much power in Ankara to start. So therefore, I'm one of the person in favor of more devolution of power to local administration as much as possible. So right now, I'm not a legal expert. As I said, when you talk with the people from the Justice Ministry, they said well, here's the example from many different European countries who has similar legislation like we do. The thing that right now we are debating in Turkey, the reason that we are debating in Turkey, those events has taken place, those legislation has taken place within a context of a power struggle. And that's why people say well, you are doing this because of this you are in a hard position. But I mean, let's go beyond this. I mean, I do agree with Barçin YİNANÇ that the political elite has been indifferent to previous people's accusation and complaints when similar events was used, when similar tactics and events was used against other people, whether they were like, the old establishment, the old guards, the Kemalists, the liberals, the secularists, the Kurds, like until 2008, 2009, 2010, 11, 12, we have heard this accusation, we have heard this complaint from a very wide range of people. Vis-a-vis that, based on the fabricated evidence and based on like tenuous charges that they are being imprisoned and they are being given harsh sentences based on fabricated evidences. And unfortunately, during this time, government, because of the fight against the old guards, against the military and the bureaucratic alliance, it remained deaf, it remained silent to this criticism because it prioritized the fight against the old guards. But however, in 2012, the government saw that, once the old guard is out of the play, the same tactic will be applied to itself. And that is why, like right now, we see this government being too much attentive to such, too much sensitive to this group, the Gülenist group. So it has been a problem around for a long time. But unfortunately, as I said, like, because of the struggle against the establishment, the previous establishment, the political power in Turkey has remained silent to all these complaints for so long.
All right, not everybody agreeing with you, Galip, at this point. Farouk on Twitter saying, not letting prosecutors do their job is Turkey's new rule of law. Just take the files from them. Brilliant. Your thoughts, Emre DEMIR, at this point?
Well, if you look at the government's argumentation, which was resumed by Galip very well, if we finish off the Gülen movement in Turkey, then Turkey will have a democracy, and Turkey will have an independent justice. Well, it's very caricatural, and it is false. So Erdogan has simply invented another enemy. He started with interest lobby, the dark forces, the dark international forces, the Gezi lobby, etc., etc. Everybody who doesn't vote for Erdogan, who doesn't support the policies of Erdogan, has become traitor in Turkey. And Erdogan uses systematically hate speech now against the Gülen movement. I'm not talking about some judges or prosecutors or policemen, which is affiliated to Gülen movement. I'm talking about a movement which represents millions of people, and Erdogan every day he attacks and he insults on these people, the civilian people who has nothing to do with the justice, nothing to do with the state or police, etc. So it has become very dangerous. Actually, the state himself tried to bankrupt a Bankasia, a private bank, which has close ties to the Gülen movement. The government tried to bankrupt businessmen which has ties to the Gülen movement. So it has become very dangerous actually, and he's trying to. Erdogan himself tries to find new alliances, new political alliances to justify his positions on these new laws and simply to cover up these allegations. We now see, we can now see very close. We see that he didn't all of these laws. Erdogan didn't all of these laws chose this way for nothing. These wiretappings, legal or illegal, we don't know yet. It shows us that Erdogan was trying to cover up, some documents about the allegations of corruption within his government.
Arnaud Castagnet, let me ask you this at this point. We've seen the European Union go in for criticism when it comes to Ukraine, saying that in that particular case, it did too much and then too little and then too much. How should the European Union be handling this right now when it comes to Turkey?
Well, of course,
stay out of it, or should they wade in?
Well, of course, the European Union can have an opinion because Turkey is still in the process of applying for of becoming member of the European Union. For sure, all this operation within the police and the justice is moving Turkey away from the Copenhagen criteria. I totally agree with Emre when he said that Erdogan is using hate speech because in democracy you need to respect people who didn't vote for you, and you need to respect the institutions. In his last speech, he didn't only denounced Fethullah Gulen. He denounced the media lobby, the international lobby, the interest rate lobby, and even the robot lobby. So it's a very risky game because he's reinforcing the hardliners among his supporters, of course, and he's also transforming the local elections into a referendum in favor or against him. And I think it's going to be very interesting to watch the election especially in Istanbul, because Erdogan is involving himself with strongly. He's attacking the candidate, Mustafa Sarıgül, the candidate from the main opposition party. So now it's becoming a kind of a referendum, and of course only the polls can change what the polls have created. So it's going to be very interesting to watch how the swing voters, and I think the conservatives that may be disappointed by Erdogan, maybe the swing voters, it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to react. Are they going to vote for the Kemalist party, even if they are conservatives, or are they going to remain faithful to the AKP? That's going to be a very interesting issue.
Barçin, YİNANÇ, we've seen so many surprises over the past 6 months in Turkey. That's even more, you might say. What is your prediction as to what's going to happen going forth after these local elections? Of course, there's a national election scheduled before the end of the year.
Oh, you're leaving the $60 billion question to me. Thank you very much. I wish I knew the answer. That's why we're all sort of locked first to the local elections. Then we will have the presidential elections, and then the national elections, general elections, are scheduled for next year. But talking of surprises, it might not be a big surprise if there could be snap elections in Turkey, depending on the results of the local elections. The problem is, in general, I am optimistic about my country because this is a dynamic country. This is a country where civil society is getting stronger every day, although, as I said previously, key institutions in Turkey are under jeopardy, and the developments are not promising as far as consolidating democratic institutions in Turkey. I think they are being eroded. But on the other hand, we have a dynamic civil society that is getting stronger each day. My optimism on the long run is there, but on the short term, unfortunately, I feel that Turkey had been polarized for some time, and the latest episode, this power struggle between Erdogan and the Gülenists, has unfortunately strengthened the polarization in Turkey. Those who are staunch opponents of the AKP, they have become more and more, but I think Prime Minister's authoritarian tendencies has sort of added to the ranks of the opponents of the AKP. But on the other hand, we have the staunch supporters of the AKP who does not want to believe anything. They think that this is a plot, that this is a very successful government, and that's why there are certain lobbies trying to harm it. So no matter what evidence you would put in front of them, they seem not to leave the AKP. So unfortunately, in the short term, we will see more of polarization. Unfortunately, instead of talking about local issues on local administration during local elections, we will be talking about whether it's going to be yes for AKP or no for AKP. But as I said, on the long run, I am counting on the dynamism of the Turkish civil society, who is getting more and more conscious, more and more forceful, despite disproportionate use of force of the police, despite harsh reaction from the government.
All right, and for the time being, investors are still seeing this as a soap opera, not yet as a horror movie, although stocks are down since the beginning of the year and since last year. We talked earlier about the pinch of inflation and a sliding currency. Galip, DALAY, very briefly, because we're almost out of time. Erdogan, the point that's made by Barçin there about him being polarizing in this situation, at what point does Erdogan have to then step aside for someone else in the AKP?
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear well.
At what, very briefly, do you think that there could be a scenario where at some point Erdogan has to step aside for someone else in the AKP?
Well, I don't see such a scenario. I mean, one of the structural roots of the polarization in Turkey has something to do with Erdogan himself. But actually, the real reason for that is not Erdogan himself. Is like there is a structural reason for that, because for the first time in Turkey's history, that the civilian politics means something. Previously, all the big issues in Turkey was decided by military and bureaucratic alliance. But for the first time,
so you're saying I'm going to have to cut you off because we're out of time. What you're saying is that the script is still unwritten on what's going to happen next. Galip, DALAY, I want to thank you very much for joining us from Ankara. I want to thank Barçin, YİNANÇ for being with us in Istanbul. Emre, DEMIR, and Arnaud, CASTAIGNET, thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.